Hi, I'm Alex, and today I'd like to tell you the story about making my first feature film. So I'm not going to give too many exact dates here because I didn't really keep a log or anything like that, but I'll try to be roughly accurate. Subject 36 is a script that I started writing in 2015 and my second year of film school. And rather than spend the money to go to a third year of film school at a different institution, I decided to make a film instead. I thought that that would be a good way to do what I love to do creatively, expand my skills, get to meet some new people, and get some real practical experience on set at the same time as, building my portfolio of work and just basically doing something that I really wanted to do. So I knew from the outset that I wasn't going to have much budget for this. Basically, I pretty much just put my own money into it. I think all up I spent around $2,500. I mean, maybe it was closer to 3 or maybe closer to 2. I'm not quite sure because again, I wasn't really keeping records on this particular project because it was my first time and it was entirely self-funded. And often I was just figuring out what I needed week to week and seeing what money I had week to week based on the income I was getting. So I'd cast a couple of short films before this using auditions, and I'd come to really like the process and get used to it. So I put out a casting call. I ended up casting Cassandra Ann Smith and Matthew Nicholas Phillips as our main two roles. Casey is the main role, Gwen, and both of them did a fantastic job embodying characters with lots of little quirks and small emotional nuances, and I think they did a great job, and I'm extremely glad to have worked with them. I've worked with Matt since on a couple of different projects, and so he's become a great collaborator. Casey's in the UK now, doing her own thing. In terms of where that roughly $2,500 went, I already had my gear, so that wasn't something I counted as part of the budget, because that's something I've been building over the years. I gave the lead role $600, the supporting role $400, and the rest of the cast would be either working for free or I'd give them $50, depending on how much money I had during the day. And I sought auditions using a site called Star Now, which is good for Australian filmmakers looking for cast or crew, for that matter. Any beginner filmmakers, I would definitely recommend using a site like that. Your country will likely have an equivalent kind of site, because like you, starting out filmmaking, there are always actors who are willing to work for free or a small amount, and some of them are very good. Now obviously I wouldn't recommend intentionally trying to take advantage of people. If you can afford to pay people, pay them. That's my policy. Never forget how important your cast and crew are. They're the people that help get the movie made. Without them, nothing happens. If you're not able to pay them, there are other ways that you can make their time worthwhile. With my friends who helped me out on this project, I'd often exchange their help for my help on their projects. So when you're starting out and you can't afford to pay people, offering your own services as payment is an excellent alternative, I think. Everybody helps each other out and it all works out well. One thing I did learn on this project is how important it is to have a diverse and wide network of filmmakers who you can call upon. At the time, there wasn't a lot of filmmakers that I knew, but I thought I'd do alright in getting people to help me out. People from my film school class and a couple other people that I'd met in that time. But as it turned out, and this is totally fair, no judgment on any of them, it was not very often that people were free and able to help me out on the project. Which of course I understand. I mean, I'm not offering them any money. So most days I had maybe 2 or 3 people helping me out. Some of the days it was just me and a sound person operating the boom and the mixer at the same time, and me doing everything else. And there were unfortunately a couple of days, 2 days, where it was literally just me because the sound person had something come up and they weren't able to make it that day and they had to cancel. So these days ended up being some of the worst shot stuff in the film. We had to reorganize what we had planned for that day to make it something that was easily achievable with just one person on crew. So the one that turned out the best of these was the bedroom scene, because what I was able to do is simply attach my boom to a light stand and operate the camera myself. The characters were static, so I didn't have to worry about the boom needing to be moved or anything like that. On the other hand, there were days like the first date scene by the river where I was also working against time with the sun moving. So with only me there, I had to set up the camera on the tripod. I couldn't adjust it at all, and then I had to hold the boom myself so that the sound would be decent. This led to me not being able to prioritize my composition, although now with a bit more experience I could probably do better at that, and it led to a rather shoddy looking scene with no particular lighting or anything like that. After that I had a Steadicam shot walking with the characters by the river, and so for that I essentially just had to stick a Rode video mic on top of the camera and hope that the audio was fine. It was not. So, all of that audio ended up being dubbed in post. Hopefully it's not too noticeable. Our first day on set was probably the best day in terms of what we got done. We shot for 11 hours and we covered all of the second date scene, which is quite a long sequence, overly long I think, now looking back, and all the other sequences in Joseph's house, as well as a sequence towards the end that's in a different location, which we used the front room of that same house for. We ended up replacing that location at a later date once we found a better one. But essentially we got about 20 minutes of footage in a single day. All up I think we shot 15 days. Some of these days were quite inefficient because of last minute changes that had to be made, which meant we couldn't shoot some stuff one day, and it ended up shortening our shoot days, so we'd have like a 4 or 6 hour shoot day rather than a 10-hour shoot day. But on the other hand, I'd also probably do more refinement these days if I was shooting the same thing. So 15 shoot days is probably similar to what it would have taken if I'd shot it today, but it would look better. The small amount of budget that I didn't pay to cast or crew for helping some days, I paid to an artist to commission a painting to use as a prop in the film, to buy a few props for the film, and in a couple of cases, locations. Most of the time I was able to rely on goodwill and get locations for free. Now it was difficult for me as a first-time feature filmmaker because naturally I'm not terribly outgoing, and asking people if you can use their house or a location that they own for a film is something that's very intimidating, but it's a really important skill to be able to learn if you're trying to make films on an independent level, low budget, without many resources. And a lot of making your first feature film is probably going to be you doing things yourself. The number of hats I had to wear in this production was just crazy. I mean, I directed it, produced it, wrote it, did the cinematography, I did all the lighting myself most days. There were some days where I had someone to help with lighting. A lot of the time I was doing production design. Sound, as mentioned, occasionally I had to do sound myself. Most of the time I had the help of my good friends Liam Friedel and Jesse Fury. I had to find all the locations myself, liaise with different people, keep the set on time, so essentially I was first AD as well, organize extras, so I was doing essentially a second AD role. Basically, yeah, it can really drive you crazy sometimes, like that number of hats just really throws you off balance. But being able to multitask, to juggle all these different elements is something that's not only sometimes going to be necessary as a first-time filmmaker, but also it's something that's going to help you throughout, I think, the rest of your career. If you can do anything on set, then you're never truly trapped on a set. Like, you're never completely stuck. If someone doesn't show up, if someone isn't available at a certain point in time, you can just say, look, I'll do that, and you sort it out, and you're saved. I got some generous support from some local businesses. Network Video Mount Hawthorne generously let us shoot in the shop for free, as did Mid-Century Cafe and Collectibles, which is a cafe near where I live, which was used for the cafe scene. We had to shoot that scene pretty guerrilla because it was a real business with people occupying it. So that was something that was difficult to work around, but in the end, it sort of worked okay. We just had to be pretty efficient with our shots. We couldn't ask people to be quiet on set or anything like that. We just had to shoot around them. So some of those people in that scene are actual extras, and some of them are actually just people that were attending the shop. There are some scenes in the film that were shot guerrilla just because it would be too difficult to get a proper permit to do it. Of course, if you are going to shoot in a public area without a permit, I still think it's important to be safe and to not be a bother to the area. In a public space like a park or something like that, we made sure to be very unobtrusive, not to block up any pathways, not to use too much equipment, to be respectful of people in the area, to be safe at all times. So that's something you have to think about if you don't get proper permits to secure a specific area for your filming. Of course, we knew that filming on a train was going to be extremely difficult to get permits for, so those scenes look a little sloppy because they're essentially just us sitting on the train and then sneaking a few shots of our actors. We made sure not to get shots of other people on the train in order to respect people's privacy. Because I could only pay people such a small amount, if anything, I had to rely on times when they were available. I couldn't just ask them to book time off work or anything like that, because they need to make their own money, they need to earn a living. So even though we only shot about 14-15 days, it ended up going over about 6 months. We started shooting in autumn of 2016 and finished shooting in the spring. In fact, our last couple of scenes were kind of rushed because our main leading lady has now moved to the UK, and she was leaving in October, so we had to hurry up and make sure that we got everything sorted. Still, fortunately, we were able to shoot pretty much everything. There was a scene which got cut out of the film, unfortunately, because of various different issues which caused the scene to have to be cancelled about 3 times. And in the end, we didn't have time to shoot it. Having said that, fortunately, I think it was actually a scene which was maybe not the best decision to have in the film in the first place, and I actually prefer the result of the film with that scene cut out. I think it works better for the character progression. So yeah, after that, it took me about 6 months to finish editing, and then we had 2 screenings for the film, one of them alongside a film I made in 2017 as well, a short film, Coffee, and both screenings were fortunately quite a success. I sent it out to festivals, but so far have had no success. It's a difficult market for festivals, and while I feel pretty happy with the result of the film on a story level, I can definitely see how the low production value is a reason why it would not be appealing to festivals. So the plan for Subject 36 is to release it soon, probably online, and I haven't totally decided exactly what avenue I'm going to use for that yet, and whether I'm going to make it available for free or if I'm going to make it available on a on-demand streaming service. I shot the film using the gear that I had available to me at the time, which is a lot less gear than I have now. Looking back, I'm like, wow, I can't believe I shot this on such a shitty tripod and with $135 worth of lighting gear, maybe $150 if you include the reflector. I just got a very basic lighting kit off eBay. But it served the project well, and there is surprisingly a lot you can do with very cheap gear. My lighting kit was essentially just 3 soft boxes with compact fluorescents inside. I shot on a GH4 with a speed booster and my Nikon lenses, which I've had since I was doing photography on my Nikon camera, and which I'm still even using now with my Ursa Mini Pro. Any other lighting was practical lighting that I got either at the location or which I brought from my home. It was all done for very cheap. I was using a pretty cheap little handheld Steadicam, which was what I had at the time. Now I have a proper Steadicam, but at the time that was all I had, and I wasn't the best operator of it. I have weak arms. But yeah, it worked all right. It's not perfect, but I'm happy enough. So, was it worth it making a film for that sort of price? I have to say, I don't really know yet. I was hoping I would get into some festivals. I didn't get into any festivals. So on that regard, I suppose it was a failure. I do feel a great sense of personal achievement in terms of creating this film. And I like the film. I think it's pretty decent. Not perfect. I look back on the script and I think, yep, that's not so great, that's not so great. But overall, I think it's a solid story. I'm glad that I did something interesting rather than just an exercise in filmmaking. I never wanted to do just exercises in filmmaking. I wanted to tell stories that I thought were interesting, that were thought-provoking. So on a personal level, I'm satisfied. It taught me a lot about managing a set, producing, organizing, all this sort of stuff, this sort of thing which I naturally shy away from. The behind the scenes pre-production stuff. I made these contacts with people who are good friends of mine now. So yeah, overall, I'm satisfied. It cost me a little bit of my own money, but I think it was worth it. I guess I'll say, if you're starting out as a filmmaker, you're probably not going to start out making perfect works of art. there's always going to be a lot of flaws. You're going to look back and see all these flaws and you're going to think, I really wish I'd done this differently. All that experience is really valuable in my opinion in terms of teaching yourself how to do different things and try and make something awesome. And if it doesn't work out, then you make the next thing better. And that's what I'm going to do, because I've got a project coming up which I'm trying to raise some funds for, some crowdfunding, and there'll be more about that on my channel soon. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, like and subscribe, and I'll see you later.